Hello, everyone. Welcome to Winnipeg Sports Talk. My name is Hrabchak. Today, I'm joined by Lyss Hode, and together we are going to be projecting Team Canada's roster at the upcoming Four Nations Face-Off tournament. Just a quick clarification, this is our roster. We're not predicting what Team Canada is going to do, but rather we're drafting our own roster. We're putting our GM caps on. Lyss, how are you doing today? And maybe speak to the players who have already been selected to Team Canada.
Yeah, I'm psyched to be doing this. It's going to be a really fun tournament. Obviously, we haven't had a lot of best-on-best hockey in quite some time, so a lot of hockey fans are really excited for this coming up in 2025. It's also a nice little primer of the Olympics coming up where the stakes are a little bit higher 2 years from now as well, so we're looking forward to that. But it was announced that a couple players have already been named as locks to these teams. We're not surprised to find out that Connor McDavid is going to be making this team when the rosters drop in a couple of days, coming up very soon. So we are going to be building our roster today and starting off with some players that we don't really have any say on. Would we change a lot of this? No, probably not. Spoiler alert, even without the locks, Connor McDavid does make my Team Canada personally. But the locks that we have here, you can tell there's a lot of center depth, are Nathan MacKinnon, Brad Marchand, Connor McDavid, Braden Point, Sidney Crosby, and Cale Makar. So those players have all been named to Team Canada already. Can't move them, can't change them. We can always obviously configure where they go in the lineup, but they have been named to the team. Other than Brad Marchand, though, Connor, I don't think that there's a whole ton of controversy around some of these names. Personally, I think Braden Point being like a top 5 forward lock was maybe a scooch surprising, but like he would make everybody's Team Canada, no questions asked, a phenomenal hockey player. But any thoughts on these before we dive into our locks?
No, I mean, the biggest theme with Canada, and everyone says it, is their center depth is what is their kind of biggest selling feature going into this tournament, their biggest strength. And when you look at their locks, it's very evident. And I'm going to say it throughout the video, but don't read into the line combinations that we're throwing out here. We're just drafting 13 forwards, 7 defensemen, 3 goaltenders, whatever pairing combination or line combination. Feel free to, make the roster yourself. This is from Puckpedia. If you just search up Puck GM on Google or whatever browser you'd like, you can create your own Four Nations roster. That's how we're building this. So shout out to Puckpedia for letting us use this. And the center depth is something else. It's how Canada's going to win this tournament is on the back of that center depth. But I would not change anything. Maybe Brad Marchand would be a little bit, wouldn't be a surefire lock for me. Maybe be a little bit lower in the lineup or maybe be one of those bubble forwards given how he started the season. But like you said, not much to really discuss there. Let's get into our locks, kind of going around the players that have already been named. So we're adding Sam Reinhart, Mitch Marner, Mark Stone, Devon Toews, and Josh Morrissey. Liz, what do you have to say about our locks going hand in hand with Canada's locks?
Yeah, so what we kind of mean by adding these into this core roster here is that these are guys that we think hands down, non-negotiably make this team. So starting with the defense, Devon Toews has had some really strong success with Cale Makar in Colorado. But even outside of playing with Cale Makar, he's an incredible defenseman, easily one of the best to have ever worn the Maple Leaf. Same thing with Josh Morrissey. If you look at a lot of polls and a lot of, expert projections of this roster right now, he is one of the most highly regarded Canadian defensemen right now. Based on most of what I've seen, Connor, honestly, I think he is this number 2 for most people in terms of who they think is going to make this D-core roster. Josh Morrissey has had an incredible start to the season, had an incredible season last year as well. And, when it comes to building this team, you got to ride the hot hand, who's playing really well right now and who's had a pretty good career. Josh Morrissey fits that bill incredibly. So these are our locks on defense. I would be absolutely shocked if neither of these players or one of these 2 players didn't make this team. And then looking at the forwards, Sam Reinhart, absolute bona fide goal scorer who has a lot of other versatile aspects to his game. Mitch Marner, we know, people can poke fun at his playoff performance and whatnot, but there's no arguing that he is one of the best playmakers in the National Hockey League. And Mark Stone, absolute beast of a player, Canadian legend. These guys all make our Team Canada without a question.
Yeah, and I will say, I know there are some question marks being raised about Mark Stone and the fact that he's been hurt the last couple years, and he's currently, at the time of this recording, hurt day-to-day with an injury for Vegas. So, I know we're a few months away and the roster is going to be named December 4th, but that could be something where maybe Mark Stone and the Vegas Golden Knights don't want him playing in a tournament like that if he's a little banged up. But like you said, on talent alone, he makes our roster and he's a surefire lock. He's one of the best two-way forwards in the entire NHL. And yeah, we've got 5 centers. So we've got a lot to sort out there. McKinnon, McDavid, Point, Crosby, and Reinhart all playing down the middle. I know Reinhart really plays the wing for Florida, but yeah, there's a lot of center depth here. But we're actually going to go to the defense first and discuss some of our bubble picks on the back end. We're going to discuss the players that we chose, maybe some players, some honorable mentions, but let's start with the blue line. Here is the remainder of our defense core. So we already added Taves and Morrissey as locks, and we're adding on Alex Pietrangelo, Shea Theodore, Evan Bouchard, and Mackenzie Weegar. So 2 players there from the Battle of Alberta, Bouchard and Weegar, and 2 players from the Vegas Golden Knights, Pietrangelo and Theodore. Lyss, what do you have to say about our additions to the blue line rounding out Canada's defense core?
Well, I mean, spoiler alert, I like it. I really like this decor, because considering pat on the back, we built it. But Shea Theodore and Alex Pietrangelo are kind of like I don't know, it's like the Chanel version of Devin Taves and Cale Makar, where it's not like it's the Gucci version. It's awesome and good in its own way. It's not the Walmart version, but they're just a little bit different, but they're unbelievable. I am a Shea Theodore truther. I think he's one of the best defensemen in the National Hockey League. I think even though he won a Stanley Cup with the Vegas Golden Knights in a massive role, he's still a little bit underrated in some circles when people talk about who some of the best defensemen are. So between him and Pietrangelo, there's a little bit of an age gap there. Pietrangelo brings a little bit more of the veteran experience and whatnot, but he's not one of those guys that, when we get to the forward, spoiler alert, someone like Steven Stamkos doesn't make our roster, who is just a little bit on the wrong side of the aging curve there. Pietrangelo, I think, still has a couple of real good years left in them. So I think I really like that pick for that reason. And then looking at Evan Bouchard and Mackenzie Weegar, Evan Bouchard I know might be a little bit of a controversial one, but there's no doubt that guy's a point machine and has played incredible hockey in high stakes situations, considering how he performed in the playoffs last year. And Mackenzie Weegar, as our 7th defenseman, hasn't had a super great start to the season, but I think is a really, really solid defenseman. I really like him. And I think that this decor kind of as a whole has a good balance of, left and right-handed defensemen, a couple of guys who are a bit more of a shutdown vibe, a couple of power play quarterbacks, a couple of goal scorers. There's a lot of versatility in this decor, which I think is pretty sweet. So I don't know. I really like it.
Yeah, I'm gonna quickly defend the Evan Bouchard pick because, like you said, I think that's the most controversial one, and I was an advocate for it when me and you were building this roster. Evan Bouchard this year, in the year of 2024, put together one of the greatest playoff runs we've ever seen from a defenseman. And I know he has struggled to start the season, this 20-game sample size, but that even is a little bit subjective in my opinion. You scroll Twitter late at night, the Edmonton Oilers are playing, you see a clip, Evan Bouchard giving up on a play, I get it. If you don't want to have him on your roster because, you see those clips of him, maybe not giving 100% in certain situations, I 100% understand, but we drafted him because of that playoff run last season. And despite some of those viral clips where he's maybe not giving it 100%, the Oilers are still absolutely dominating their minutes when Evan Bouchard is on the ice. So I'm just not going to ignore really the underlying numbers for Bouchard and take a few clips on social media of him not giving 100% and completely take him off the roster because I think he's easily one of the 6 best Canadian defensemen right now. And that's why he makes our roster. So that's it for the defense core. Now, this is the most polarizing part of Team Canada. Going up front to the forward core. I mean, we started off with all those centers. We're moving guys around. There's so much talent up front. Here are our locks and eventually our full roster. We'll get into the goalies a little bit later. But up front, we had all the players there. We are adding Brandon Hagel, Carter Verhaeghe, Nick Suzuki, Connor Bedard, and Mark Scheifele to our forward core. Lyss, thoughts on this forward core as we picked what we think are the 13th best Canadian forwards?
Yeah, so I think the logic that Connor and I went with here is the logic that Team Canada can and should roll with, which is just the whole idea of fighting fire with fire. There's a little bit of conversation to be had about, trying to manage with some defensive depth to shut down the USA's scoring and whatnot. But at the end of the day, you need to take the 13 best forwards that are available if you want to win this tournament, especially since, the goaltending, which we'll get into, is something that Team Canada is certainly lacking in that department. So Connor and I's philosophy here with putting this together was taking the 13 best forwards in the National Hockey League. The little asterisk I think that we'll put on with that one is Connor Bedard here. We understand that pick might be a little bit controversial just because we know he hasn't had a super hot start to the season and he is a little bit on the young side. But we already mentioned and kind of alluded to the impact this could possibly have on the Team Canada Olympic roster. So we think it'd be really good for him to be on this team as kind of an X factor 13th forward if they need someone to come in and have an impact on a game offensively. I think he has that potential. And also, we just know the NHL, and we highly doubt that there is. We like the opportunity for putting Crosby, McDavid, and Bedard all in the same jersey together. I think it's just too good of an opportunity to pass up. So we really like that. But we know that there are a couple other controversial picks on our team, but we really feel strongly about, guys like Brandon Hagel and Nick Suzuki and the versatility that their game brings to this roster. And Jets fans will be happy to see that Mark Scheifele also makes our team. I heard today that apparently Craig Button and Mike Johnson put together their roster, and it sounds like they have Mark Scheifele playing on the wing with McDavid, which is really interesting. A lot of people have really liked Scheifele's start to the season. So I'm a huge fan of this roster. Do you want to touch on any of these guys that I haven't dove into as much?
I do. I want to talk about Brandon Hagel because, like Evan Bouchard, I posted my own kind of roster on Twitter, and Hagel and Bouchard were the two players I got the most pushback on. So those are the two players I'm going to defend the most here. Brandon Hagel, with 26 points in 21 games for the Tampa Bay Lightning so far this season, is easily also one of the best two-way wingers in the NHL, a great forechecker as well. I know you and I do WST Sunday Live with Jacob Stoller, and he brought up, the forechecking element that you kind of want to see. I know we have Hagel in the top six. Like I said, don't read into the line combinations too much, but maybe Hagel will play a bottom six role alongside Nick Suzuki on that fourth line, where Canada needs some of the best forecheckers to supplement that skill. Brandon Hagel's one of those guys, and Nick Suzuki as a 4C, I think the defensive abilities, you've seen that out of Canada. That's why Adam Lowry was mentioned, Anthony Cirelli as potential candidates for that 4C role. Nick Suzuki, I think, is a great two-way center, great defender, so he's our 4C. And like you said, Connor Bedard, I'd like to see him just get in a game because no doubt he's going to play a bigger role for Canada at the 2026 Olympics, or at least that's the plan. So get him into this tournament, get him around all these players that he'll play with in 2026, maybe get him into a game. And hey, it's going to be great for marketing as well if Connor Bedard is playing on a line with McDavid and Crosby, like you said, Lyss. So any honorable mentions off the top of your head that maybe we missed out, both on the forward core and defense core, just to touch on some guys that just barely missed our roster?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things where, we can really, butt heads with other people over certain picks on here, but there are a lot of really talented Canadian forwards out there. So I understand that, there are some guys that are kind of on the cusp, but we had some pretty strong opinions on some of the guys that we left off our roster. So some guys that were, spoken about as being part of this core group kind of early this summer, guys like Matt Barzal, who's had a bit of an injury to start the season, so that kind of rules him out for me. And guys like Zach Hyman. Zach Hyman is one that I think I've seen on a lot of rosters, just considering the chemistry he's had with Marner and McDavid in the past. But when it comes to this team, you only have 13 highly sought-after spots. And while Zach Hyman is a bona fide goal scorer, he is automatic with the puck on his stick. He isn't automatic right now, and if he's not scoring goals, the versatility of his game lacks in so many other areas that it doesn't with these 13 forwards, that he doesn't have enough to make the roster for me right now. If he was on pace for another 60-goal season right now, we might be having a little bit of a different conversation, but if he's not doing what he does best, I don't see a spot for him on this team, so that's why I leave him off. And maybe the last kind of honorable mention that I'll bring up is Robert Thomas, who also probably would have made this roster if it weren't for some injury troubles. But I know you have a couple honorable mentions as well that you think are some guys that, it's important for us to acknowledge that we didn't forget them, but they just didn't simply have enough to make these top 13.
Yeah, and before I get into my sort of honorable mentions or players that just missed the list, let us know down below in the comments which players you think we left off our Team Canada, which ones you think would be on your team or we should have picked. We love to hear the discourse down in the comments. Best on best discourse is always fun, drafting these teams. That's why we are doing this video, and we really appreciate you watching. Real quick, Steven,
$162 million cap hit. Well, I gotta love it.
They're way over the cap. But anyways, Steven Stamkos is a player that, has played big roles for Canada in the past. The 5v5 struggles this year really do worry me, not only for Stamkos, but every time he's on the ice and really the Nashville Predators in general. I'm not placing that all on Steven Stamkos, but just not really seeing enough there outside of the power play, which of course he's dominant at. Another one on the defense core, Noah Dobson is a player that I considered over Evan Bouchard or Mackenzie Weegar as another offensive defenseman, puck-moving guy on that third pair, but I already made my arguments for Evan Bouchard, so I'll kind of leave that where it is. And Travis Konechny, going back to the forward core, I did want to bring him up because he has been one of the best Canadian forwards in the NHL over these first 20 games. He's been carrying the Philadelphia Flyers offense, even though they've had their own struggles as a team. He just barely missed my list. We had Mark Scheifele in over him at that fourth line right wing role. Him, Zach Hyman, Travis Konechny, I think are the three guys that we really debated for that role, but ultimately went with Mark Scheifele on the NHL's best team, driving that top line. We think he's earned that spot. Anything else, Lyss, before we get to the goaltenders?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that looking at this group, the center depth is really, really what's impressive here. We talked about that at the beginning, and we have so many guys here that can move in and play in that center role, which I think is awesome. It was a priority for us to choose the 13 best forwards, not worry too much about the positioning, because there is a little bit more flexibility that you can have with moving centers to the wing as opposed to wings to the center, especially if they don't have a lot of experience in the position, that they'd be moving into. So I think that depth gives them the flexibility to make some adjustments and have an agile lineup if they need it in order to beat the powerhouse that is the USA. And also, we can't sleep on Sweden and Finland either when looking at this Team Canada here. So I think the center depth is the part, we have to lean on the competitive advantage over the US because we know that it's not the goaltending, and frankly, I don't think it's the defense either. So I think that depth is very, very interesting, and it's going to be a huge X factor for Team Canada.
Yeah, I think the argument for if you're picking Team Canada to win this tournament, I think your argument has to be because they have the three best players in the tournament, in Connor McDavid, Nathan MacKinnon, and Cale Makar. The USA has them beat in goaltending. They have them beat in depth. They have them beat on the blue line. So the only real argument for Team Canada, in my opinion, is that they have the three best players, and those players can take over a game, even in a best-on-best scenario. And watching them attempt to do that and maybe successfully doing that is going to be so much fun at this Four Nations Face-Off. But let's get to the goaltenders and the full roster. We are choosing Logan Thompson as our starter for Team Canada, Jordan Binnington as our backup, and our third goaltender, a bit of a legacy pick, Marc-Andre Fleury. Lyss, what do you have to say about the goaltenders? We buried the lead long enough with the goaltenders and the scariness that comes with it, Canadian goaltenders, but here they are, Thompson, Binnington, Fleury.
Well, there are like a bunch of goalies in the NHL that make over $7.5 million. And none of them are on this roster because none of them are Canadian. So it's very clear that, this is an area where Canada lacks. Everyone's talked about it. I don't want to harp on these guys any more than we have to, but we have to.
Yeah.
So Logan Thompson has had a decent start to the season over in Washington. He also was a big part of the powerhouse Vegas Golden Knights team that ended up going to the Stanley Cup. He's had a decent track record, and again, you just weigh it against the alternatives, in which in this situation we have Jordan Binnington, who we also know has had an X Factor season when he won the Stanley Cup with the St. Louis Blues, albeit 5 years ago, but he definitely has had some strong performances. And in terms of just career-wise and not being past his expiry date, is probably the best Canadian goaltender. We just have seen what it's like when Jordan Binnington is not at his best, tries to fight people, complains, sucks. We understand the negatives are there, but I think it makes sense to bring him in on this roster. And then the last one, Marc-Andre Fleury, like you said, kind of a legacy pick. This is just one that, the second and third string goaltenders probably aren't going to play a ton of games unless you're trying to run a tandem situation, which I don't think Canada will if they trust their starter. You don't want to unless you have to, kind of thing. So Marc-Andre Fleury and our roster would not get a ton of games, but he's the type of guy who I think even at this stage in his career, he just celebrated his 40th birthday. So, we know he's not too young in terms of NHL player ages. But I think he still has the ability to come in, stand on his head, and win a game for a hockey team more so than some of the other options. So I think that high risk, high reward sort of pick makes sense for the third string goaltender for this team, which is why we chose Marc-Andre Fleury as our third string.
Yes, absolutely. Like you said, I don't think the third string's really going to play. Why not bring along a Canadian goaltending legend in Marc-Andre Fleury, multiple Stanley Cups, and then Logan Thompson. I think he's got a .917 save percentage at the time of this recording for the Washington Capitals, easily playing like the best Canadian goaltender right now. And then Jordan Binnington, he's sub 900 save percentage right now for St. Louis, but last year he was one of the best goaltenders in the entire league. I think top 5 in goals saved above expected, and was really good for St. Louis. So hopefully he can return to that form, and we're picking him as our backup. And this is our entire roster. This is going to conclude this video. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. If you enjoyed it, make sure you hit the like button down below. In the comments, make sure you rip us. Let us know where we went wrong, which players you think we missed. And we'd love to hear who you chose for your Team Canada. So drop it down in the comments below. As for this video, I'm Connor Hrabchak, she's Lyss Hode. Thank you so much for watching. We're looking forward to the official announcement of these rosters December 4th. Thanks for watching, everyone, and we'll catch you next time on Winnipeg Sports Talk. See ya.